southwestern corner of Steuben County, just south of Hornell, and north of the metropolis of Greenwood. My dad was from there, Steve's been involved with the history of the southwestern part of Steuben County his entire life, and he helped to form the Canasteo Historical Society in the 1990s. And if you've not been to their facility, it really is a nice place to visit. It's a lot of great artifacts in there. As does the Greenwood Historical Society, both, and West Union. I mean, they all have, down that valley, have some great facilities. He helped to form the new Hartsville Historical Society in 2019. And he's a board member of the Steuben County Historical Society and serves on the Steuben County Hall of Fame Committee. Steve has published several books through the Arcadia book. There's Images of America, Canasteo, along with a book about the New York and Pennsylvania Railway, which I have, and it's a great book. And his most recent book, which he'll speak about tonight, is Clara Comstock, the Orphan Train Lady. I'll turn it over to Steve. Thank you for being here, and thank you, folks, for attending.
Appreciate it very much. Do you want to turn down some of the lights or not? Or it doesn't matter, it's up to you guys.
Yeah.
You probably can see it, but sometimes it's better if they are. No, you don't need all of them, Tom. It's all of them. So, as John says, I'm from Canasteo, lived Canasteo all my life. And I always say, what good's history if you can't share it? So I do lots and lots of PowerPoints. Most of them are the southwestern part of Steuben County, which is, like John mentioned, Hartsville, Greenwood, West Union, Canasteo, Hornell, Howard, those areas. But I do other things, and like he said, my Nip Railroad, I brought some of my books in case anybody's interested. Nip Railroad and the Images of America, everybody sees these, are all towns all over. And then my newest one is the Clara Comstock book. History's no good if you can't share it, so let's share some tonight. And if I don't talk loud enough, tell me to speak up. I'm okay with that. And I'm going to read some things from your slides, so if I turn my back to you, it's not because I don't like you. Okay? I'll probably stand over this way a little bit. So let's talk about Clara Comstock, and she's been known as the Orphan Train Lady. Around 2019, Steuben County created what we call a History Awareness Week. During COVID, we couldn't do it in person, so every town did something online, a little blurb about their town. But every week in October, we come up with a topic, and one year it was World War I. 1 year was agriculture, 1 year transportation. In 2023, it was people that made a difference in society and the world. So, southwestern part of Steuben County, I says, who do I got? I had a hard time thinking. And I says, oh, Clara Comstock. So this is a story about Clara Comstock, who born and raised in Hartsville, on how she got her start as being known as the Orphan Train Lady. My wife would kill you if I sang, but we're going to go through this little song. I won't sing it for you because, like I said, my wife will say, guaranteed, you won't want him to sing it. But I will read it to you. Once I had a darling mother, though I can't recall her name. I had a baby brother who I'd never see again. For the children's home has sent us out on the orphan train to find someone to take us in. Take us in, we have rode the orphan train. Take us in, we need a home, we need a name. Take us in, oh won't you be our kin? We are looking for someone to take us in. I've stolen from the poor box, I've begged from the city streets, I've swaddled the bars and the pool rooms for a little bite to eat. In my daddy's old green jacket and those rags upon my feet, I've been looking for someone to take me in. Now the children's home, they've gathered us, me and all the rest. They've taught us how to sit quietly while the food is blessed. Then they put us on the orphan train and sent us way out west to try to find someone to take us in. Now the farmers and their families, they come for miles around. They line up on the platform in the stations of each town. One by one, we're parted like living lost and found. One by one, we are taken in. Now there's a good doctor or a teacher in your school. There's many a good preachers that taught the golden rule, who started out on the orphan train in the freezing rain, whose life began out on the orphan train. So that is Utah Phillips' song, most popular song about the orphan train. So let's talk a little bit of history about the orphan train. The orphan train started in 1854 and ran into 1928. There is an estimated 280,000 kids during that 70-some year period that were taken and found new homes for. Most of them went to the Midwest states. The Children's Aid Society was on East Avenue and on East 22nd Street in New York City. The children were nervous, for they were about to embark on a life-changing journey. Miss Comstock was undoubtedly confident and put them at ease. After all, the Children's Aid Society was established to provide for the poor and abandoned and neglected children living in the streets of New York City. The Reverend Charles Bryce established the Bryce Memorial Farm School, emphasizing on the importance of self-help. The school believed that the best way to help these children was to establish a network of industrial schools. The schools would provide the children basic needs and fundamental and providing instructions in reading, writing, mathematics, and occupational skills. They taught the girls sewing, dressmaking, hat making, domestic skills like cleaning and cooking, while the boys were being taught carpentry skills, shoemaking, farming. By 1900, New York City had around 2,500 of these types of schools. The children needed a second chance. Ms. Comstock, along with other Children's Aid Society workers, would accompany the children into towns where good, respectable people would take them in. She's looking to have them being part of a family, part of their family, and to provide for them for a chance for a better life. The Children's Aid Society workers would interview prospective parents. After a week, they would reevaluate their decisions, talking separately to the children and the parents. If it wasn't a good fit, they would pull the child out of the house and place them in another. They had that authority to do that, either in that community or another community on down the rail line. Each of the agents from the Children's Aid Society would place the child, but they would also follow up with them every year until they became of age of 18 years old. Mrs. Comstock was inducted into the Steuben County Hall of Fame in 2018. So let's talk about how she got involved in the Children's Aid Society, a little old lady born and raised in Hartsville, New York. She grew up in Hartsville. She was born in July of 1879 to Charles and Charity Comstock. She had a brother named Daniel who was 2 years older than her. Her father made a living as a farmer or doing blacksmithing. She graduated from the Kansas Steel Academy at the age of 16 in 1895. She went on to continuing education at the academy for teaching, to be a teacher in the one-room schoolhouses. In order to be a teacher, back in 1895, you had to be at least 18 years old to enter the teacher's training course. You had to have 28 academic counts in a specific subject. You had to have 46 to graduate from high school. The training course lasts 1 year, but most students, it took 1.5 to 2 years to complete it. The certificate was valid for 3 years. If you taught 2 out of the 3 years, your certificate would be renewed for a 5-year period. If you continued to teach, it was good for a lifetime. You taught elementary grade school levels. This is a picture of Miss Comstock on her father's farm in Hartsville. Her first job after she passed the teacher's training course was her home school, where she went to school as a child in Hartsville School number 5. 1898 is when she started teaching, making a salary of $7 a week. Leaving Hartsville in 1903, she started her career at the Brace Memorial Farm School in Westchester County, just north of New York City. Now, how did she get from Hartsville down there? Her uncle worked as a maintenance on that farm. That's how she knew the contact. Down there, she's making $40 a month. She's only making $7 a week up in Hartsville. And Hartsville, she's paying her own room and board, and down there it's provided for her. So it was a no-brainer for her to go down there, it appears. The school was a 158 farm that taught homeless boys between the ages of 10 and 16 successful farming skills. They were taught agriculture, literacy, life skills such as personal hygiene and basic manners. Arrangements would be made for them to either go south or west. Now, in 1854, when the orphan training movement started, a lot of the farmers in the south and west wanted these boys, and they were mostly boys to start with, for an extra farmhand. That's when the Children's Aid Society stepped in here and said, no, you're not taking them just for child labor. So that's when they started going through and selecting parents, having the right to move a child if that's what they felt that was happening to that child, to improve their life. They want these kids to have a better life than what they had in New York City on the streets. Picture of the Brace Farm School. Got a couple more pictures of that. Boys are playing baseball. Not quite sure what these boys are doing, but this next slide is called the shoe race. I have no idea what a shoe race is, but this boy's barefooted and carrying his shoes. These boys are barefooted. I tried Googling shoe race, and I get some computer game. So, I don't know back then, in the early 1900s, what a shoe race was. Haven't been able to figure it out. She worked 8 years for this farm school before she got involved in the Children's Aid Society in New York City in 1911. Here, she gained her name as the orphan trained lady that stuck with her entire life. Her job was to select adoptable children from New York City orphanages and escort them on the train to destinations out west. Between 1911 to 1928, she escorted about 74 groups of children herself. As an agent, her duties was including selecting the children for the journey. The children would be washed, given a haircut, given new sets of clothes, one for traveling, and a second set of clothes to be presented to prospective parents. The agent would purchase a group ticket, as they would be cheaper for the train ride out of New York City. They would bring along provisions and buy only fresh fruit and milk at the local whistle stops along the road. They would attend to both the physical and emotional needs of the children. Clara was stern when necessary, but never held a grudge. She was a sweet, motherly type lady and provided compassionate guidance. For the most part, the children were placed in homes in the Midwest. None of them were placed past the Rocky Mountains. To find a suitable town to place these children, the town had to be on an established train route with a population between 3,000 and 4,000. Why 3,000 and 4,000? The reason why you go a population of 3,000 or 4,000 is, I'm going to talk about a committee here in a minute, but everybody kind of knows everybody. when she's placing them, she knows where the good homes are, where the bad homes are, financial needs of all the different people in the community. You get a town like Wichita, Kansas, it might have been 10,000 people, and her committee might not realize what homes you're placing those kids in. So she tried to always select a town with 3,000 to 4,000 kids in it. It also had to be in a thriving farmland community region with schools and a nearby college. The agent would select a location for a reception, have an announcement made, organize a committee of local businessmen to screen the potential foster parents. The committee would consist of a banker, someone who knew the financial background of people in the community, a minister who knew the church life of people in the community, a doctor who would know if the family was under any stress, a retired farmer who basically knew the community because he's been selling or dealing with the community his entire life, lawyer for legal matters, a merchant who knows the business life, but the most important person is the editor of the newspaper. The reason why he's the most important is because he's going to get the word out that these trains coming with these orphans on it. So it's very important. He was one of the most important person in the committee. They would usually leave New York City on a Tuesday afternoon, reaching their destination on Friday. Okay, you can go from New York City to Kansas in shorter time than that. Because trains are only traveling 40 miles an hour or so. They're not traveling the 60 or 70 or 100 miles an hour like they do nowadays. The children would get cleaned up, changed into the clothes, traveling clothes. They would meet in local churches, opera houses, hotels. If an agent saw a suitable match and the child was willing, the necessary paperwork would be drawn up for the new family. On the Saturday or Sunday, the agent would follow up by hiring a local livery to drive her out to the different families to have interviews with the children and the parents, and they usually had the interviews were separate. Following the home visit, the agent would then draft up a report and mail it back to headquarters in New York. The agent usually would be gone for about a 2-week period. Now, I have had the opportunity to actually scan 2 of her log books, and I have all the entries in my book that I published out of these 2 log books. So let's look at Rock Rapid, Iowa in her log book. She has a doctor, a druggist, an attorney, superintendent of school, the editor of the newspaper, the banker, the grocer, and a realtor on the committee here. Here she's placing 8 kids. We'll talk about Gladys Wilson down at the bottom at the end. But when she's actually going and placing the first group of kids here in Rock City, in Rock Rapids, Iowa, I said that wrong, sorry. She only has 8 kids that she's going to place. Gladys is different. So we have a brother and a sister, Edward and Mary. Their ages 14 and 12. Some of these we'll skip through fairly fast, others we'll slow down and talk about them more in detail. 12-year-old, both of their parents have died for this 12-year-old. They're placed in a household, this is a boy, Peter. He's placed in a household that's got 4 girls. June 1918, he's placed in Jack Van Garder's house at Rock Rapids, Iowa. The house is 4 miles east and 2 miles north of the depot. He has 160 acres of land, a 7-room house. He's farming. He's 1.5 miles away from the school, and he has 4 girls in the household. The next one is Roy Kilmer. He was born in Jackson Corner, New York. His father's abusive and his mother's immoral is why he's put on the train. Some of these are extremely interesting. Okay? Bertha and Rachel, they're 3 and 5 years old. The parents are not married but have separated, and the father's temperament and shiftless. Okay? They're placed in the same home. James Vicker and Vicker. Little Rock, Iowa, a half mile from the depot, 330 acres of land, 7-room farmhouse. He's farming, half mile from the school. He has no kids, no servants. And they wrote that on the first kids, but she didn't rewrite it over on that kids. Okay? Wilson Barnhart. He's the baby. Every trip they tried, and I'll mention this again, they tried to take a baby. The reason why they tried to take a baby is the baby is most called for. I'm going to go meet this orphan train. They've got 8 kids they're going to place in my town, and one of them's a baby. I've not had any kids. I'm married, and been 10, 11 years. We've had no kids. My wife and I haven't had no kids. Well, maybe I'll get that baby. But only one family is going to get that baby. But the baby gets more people out, and if they have a baby, she had a greater chance to place the other kids. So she always tried to take a baby on every trip. So here's the baby. The father's unknown. He's turned over to the Children's Aid Society by the superintendent of the poor. However, this guy rents, and he's a contractor. He's in Rock Rapids. This means that he lives right near the depot, right in town near the depot. Edwards, 8 years old, from Auburn, New York. Both parents are listed as unknown. But now we're going to get to Gladys Wilson. Gladys Wilson's one of them cases where I told you that they had a right to pull a child, and they pulled Gladys Wilson. She's 8 when she's first placed. Her mom and dad had different last names than hers. Hers is Wilson, father's is Archie's, and mom's is Peters. She's picked up at the Ontario Orphan Asylum. Some of these kids that she picked up, and you'll see here in a few minutes, even like Elmira. So they didn't all just come from the New York City orphanages that she took. 1917, she's placed with the Reverend McMillan in Forest City, Iowa. He's a Baptist minister and has a 9-year-old girl. We read that down here. But for some reason, on the back of the card, only the one column was filled out in 1917. She's not sleeping alone. He's got an 8-room farmhouse. He's got a 9-year-old daughter. But why isn't she sleeping alone? That's just kind of odd to me. 6 months later, she's pulled out of that house, and she's placed with the Methodist preacher in Earlville, Iowa. Then she's moved to Rock Rapids. Now, through this book, I had a hard time understanding her log because they're not alphabetical. Somebody says, well, is my grandfather in that book? And I go, I don't know, what town would your grandfather put in? What she did is, there was a page for each town. So she knew that when she's traveling to follow up, she's out there placing other kids next year, and she's going to follow up with some kids she placed last year. If she's in Rock Rapids, she could go to her page in Rock Rapids, and these 8 kids, now 9 kids, are in Rock Rapids, and these are the 9 that I need to follow up with. She didn't have, that was her way of logging it to know how she did it and how she followed up with it. So, it was kind of interesting to figure out her system to it. Okay, now we're going to go into this. Here's the only kid that I've seen like this, and this poor girl, I feel sorry for this poor girl. She's 7 years old. She's pulled out of the Elmira Southern Tier Orphanage in Elmira. She's board to train in 1909. She has moved and moved and moved and moved. 1909, she's with the Reverend DeWeese in Plainville, Nebraska. In 1910, she's with Bruce, who is in Painter Peace, Nebraska. 1910 in September, that's June to September, she's back with, but he's in a different town. Okay, 1912, she's 12 years old now. She's in Corning, Iowa. Then she's moved to, a little over a year later, she's moved to another place in Corning, and then to Atlantic in 1915, and then she's moved again a month later, and then she's moved into Estherville, Iowa. So what they did, each time she moved, she would pull that page out and move it to the other town to keep them in order, so she knew what kids were in which town. And then the back of her sheet, she is now going to school at Franklin Academy in Franklin, Nebraska. So some reason, whatever, didn't work out. Now the younger kids, usually under 10 years old, were adopted by the families they were placed with. But the older kids, usually the teenagers and that, and she's 9 years old when she's first placed, are in basically foster care type care. So unfortunately, that girl wasn't the poster child of the system at all. Claro escorted her last group in 1929, or 1928. Why in 1928? The reason why is the United States government came in and says you can no longer transport your orphans across state lines. So you had to find homes for them within your own state. So that's when the end of the orphan train era ended. Now, why is it called the orphan train? It was not a train of orphans. They usually always, and I'll read this again here in a slide, they always occupied the last car, the last seats in the last car. If they had a big enough group for a whole car, they would augment a passenger car at the end of the train. When she wears ahead and they're making arrangements, you could have 4 passenger trains coming into your town in one day. 2 from the east, 2 from the west, whatever direction. You could have one at 10 o'clock, noon, 2 o'clock, and 4. The one with the orphan trains, they would announce which one of those 2 trains is, and usually it would be like the 2 o'clock train, so everybody would know that wanted to adopt or was planning on going and talking to the committee would go to that particular train at that time. The term orphan train, it was the train the orphans were on, but the term orphan train didn't take hold until after 1928, which is kind of strange, but everybody knows it nowadays as the orphan train. But the term actually didn't catch on until then. After her last run on the orphan train, she became the superintendent at the Children's Aid Society and retired in 1944. She retired living in Collier Street in Hornell. She was a member of the DAR and the region from 35 to 37. She's credited with founding the Canisteo Valley Genealogical and Historical Society, which is the Historical Society in our port, Hornellsville. It's called the Canisteo Valley. We have a historical society in Canisteo, and it's spelled Kanesestio. The vowels are in alphabetical order because Hartsville has historical society. It's called the Canisteo Historical Society. So right there, close together, and it's basically the Hornellsville, the city of Hornellsville's historical society. And Hornellsville's town seat is in Arkport. It's estimated that she escorted some 12,000 kids in her career. She stayed connected with each and every one of them until they reached adulthood. She died in '63 and buried in the Hornellsville Rural Cemetery. This next little section is actually notes that I pulled from a speech that she gave in the early 1930s about her career and her going on the orphan train. The babies, like I said earlier, the babies are always called for the most interest. This interest would help place the older children. Brothers and sisters, we usually tried to place them together. If they couldn't place them together, they tried to place them in the same neighborhood, in the same town. That way they would see each other when they go to church or in school. They wouldn't lose total contact with each other. They were usually tried to place them in the homes with the same ethnicity or religion. So if I'm Catholic, I don't want to be put in a Protestant home, because that's not what my background is. That's not what I'm used to. So they tried to place a sorry about that. An Irish kid would go in an Irish home. Sorry, I gotta get a drink. Wet my throat. And like a Presbyterian kid in a Presbyterian home, Baptist kid in a Baptist home. Each children were given 2 sets of clothes, as I said earlier, a hat, coat, gloves, and a Bible. The girls were given a nice silk or wool dress. The thought was that the children must look as well groomed as the children in the home where they're going to be placed. The trunk would be checked, an emergency bag would be taken out. It would contain nice forks, spoons, bibs, towels, washcloths, soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, sewing kit, medicines for colds and coughs, steno burner to heat the baby's milk, and blankets and knitted shawls for the baby. The agent always took along their personal trunks, as they might be out west for just a couple of weeks or even for several months making the rounds, and depending on how they've been booked to do it. Back seats of the last coach, excuse me. The largers were sometimes add on to whole coaches and trains. Trip usually took 3 to 4 days. Food was seldom purchased. The food trunk would contain loaves of graham or white bread, sandwich fillings such as ham, cheese, peanut butter jelly. They also took along lettuce, celery, mayonnaise, figs, apples, oranges, cookies, cakes, and condensed milk. So, Steuben County has that History Awareness Week every week here. And in 2023, I showcased Clara Comstock. This was my display. I have a mannequin for Clara, the baby she takes along, 2 younger kids and 2 older kids. I'm going to read a little story about each one of them. My name is Elsa Roberts. My mother died when I was young, and I was sent to live with my grandma and grandpa Cobb in Adrian. Adrian is a hamlet in Canasteel, on the Erie, right on the Erie Railroad line. My father then married my aunt, and then to them was born my half-sister, Mary Elizabeth. My sister and I was placed on the orphan train in Hornell, where Miss Comstock took us to Fredonia, Kansas. In Fredonia, I lived with my foster parents until I married Earl Roberts at the age of 18. Earl and I had a son at the age of 19. Unfortunately, she died at the age of 20. Wow. Okay, her sister, Mary Elizabeth Turner Ratley. With my dad being a trailing entrepreneur, Mama could no longer care for us. She sent me to Grandma Cobb's with my sister, where Grandma Cobb put me and my sister on the train in Hornell, New York. We were taken to Fredonia. Being that we lived in the same town, we could see each other often. I was adopted by Clarence and Oral Bonds. married Ernest Ratley and became a registered nurse. Ernest and I moved to Wichita, Kansas. In Wichita, I worked, I'm pronouncing that wrong, sorry, at St. Francis Hospital during the polio pandemic. From 1948 to 1955, I worked with patients in the iron lung unit. I retired and passed away at the age of 77. Here's two photographs of her in the iron lung unit during the polio pandemic. The next one I'm going to showcase, not local really, but Henry Jost, I found his story interesting. My mother died when I was young and my ailing father could no longer take care of me. I was sent on the orphan train until I got to Hopkins, Missouri. I moved to Kansas City when I was old enough to attend law school. After law school, I became Jackson County, Kansas prosecuting attorney. Served 2 years as the mayor of Kansas City and gained the nickname of the Orphan Boy Mayor. He then served as one term as a congressman before returning back to Kansas to go back into law private practice. He married, had 2 kids. He died at the age of 76. And where he practiced law in Concordia, they took a picture of him when he was young and made a bronze statue with a plaque that explains his life history. Kind of cool. They honored him that way. Here's a more recent picture of him. Reverend Dr. Dan Bermant. I was born in England and came to the United States when I was a teenager. Shortly after, my parents died and I was sent to the orphanage and rode the train out to Kansas. I was adopted by a doctor and his wife. I graduated from Barker University in Baldwin, Kansas, and then Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. I was the head of the Christian Advocate in the Midwest, editor and author of the Ethnic League Methods, served as the Northeastern Christian Advocate for the Methodist Church, a noted guest speaker, including Ann Mornell. He died at the age of 71, leaving behind a widow and 1 son. Here's a photo of him. My next one is the baby. My baby is Richard Call. My parents immigrated from Holland. My father died in an automobile accident just before I was born. They were living in Canandaigua. My mother was a housekeeper, and on her salary was unable to care for me. So she sent me on the orphan train where Miss Comstock selected me for her next door neighbors in Hartsville. The neighbor lived next door to her parents. I rode the orphan train and was adopted by William Call and his wife Isabel. They had already adopted a girl, his sister Bernice. When my new mom died, my new dad married my school teacher, Myra Stevens. I went into the Army and served the Army from 44 to 56 and served in Korea and the Philippines. After Army, I worked at the Bath VA and was head of the prosthetic department. He was Hartsville's historian and had opened up a museum in Hartsville. He died at the age of 78. I had him inducted into the Steuben County Hall of Fame in 2019. Now, the interesting story about Richard Call is his mother gave him up because she couldn't take care of him. Father died just a few weeks before he was born. After he got old enough, he looked up his mother in Canandaigua. She was living in a rented apartment with her sister. He bought them a duplex for them to live in. So it's kind of a cool story about Richard. The next one This is the guy who I got tons of information from, and he's the one that his daughter had the 2 journals that I was allowed to copy. She's still alive, she's 93 years old, the daughter is, but this is Sam Gilletta. I was born in 1902 in an infant's asylum in New York City. I rode the Orphan train to Manila, Crawford County, Iowa in 1903, where the host family took me in. My new mother had died and I was taken in by another family. So he was taken out there. The family he was placed with, the mom had died, so they moved him to another family. Okay? Sorry, I didn't read the last sentence there, because we started missing something. Result of a farming accident, I injured my legs. The local physicians out there says, if I don't get shipped back to New York City to the hospital, I will lose my leg. He spent over a year in the hospital in New York City. His leg healed, but he always walked with a limp. At the age of 12, he was placed by Miss Comstock at the Hathaway home in Cameron, which Cameron is between Hornell and Corning, I want to say, right on the Erie line. And then, after he got old enough, he came to Howard to work on the Hornell, first as a seal inspector and then a brakeman. And that is him on the right-hand side. And more recent pictures of him. Claro, you gotta remember, lived on Collier Street in Hornell. He lived just a block away from her. So he kept in touch with her, and he ended up with a lot of her stuff. And the daughter has a lot of that stuff. Now, this is not a Clara Comstock story, but I found this here a very interesting story. Billy Montgomery's story, and he's not part of my display or anything. We're going to go into a few other little blurbs about. My parents died when I was 6 months old in 1880. He was taken on the Orphan train and in Bradford, Pennsylvania, which is south of Olean, and he was adopted by Theodis and Nettie Clarkson. The Clarkson renamed him, adopted him, and he got the name of Clarkson. The only reason why this here story was even interesting to me is because the house I lived on, Main Street in Canasteel, some lady comes to me one day and she says, my grandmother used to live in your house. I says, well, who's your grandmother? And she says, Sarah Mullen. I says, okay, that sounds weird because I live in the Floor house. The Floors ran the tannery in Canasteel. So where's this Mullen lady come in? So I'm researching this Mullen. Well, when Mrs. Floor died, this is Mr. Floor's second wife, is Mullen. When he died, she's living in the house by herself. So that's how come I got interested in this here whole story. And I didn't realize it ended up being an orphan train story at the time. The Clarksons were originally from Sullivan, Madison County. His new mom, Natty, her maiden name was Clark, and she married a Clarkson. I found that an interesting point. Don't mean anything. The Clarksons had gotten married in 1870. They had no children in 1881 when they adopted him. They moved from Sullivan County down to Pennsylvania, to Oiltown, Pennsylvania for employment reasons, and then on to Kane, Pennsylvania. And then she died 9 years later after they adopted this boy. So, Dad takes them and they move to Andover. The picture's not Andover, the picture's Canasteel. We'll talk about that. In 1893, Dad was into business with his brother in Canasteel, and this here was not part of that building when they owned it. This was when 1920s, Canasteel made it into a movie theater, but it was a store on the left side, store on the right side, and millinery shop on the right side. They ran the merchant on the left side, the grocery store on the right side, and Mrs. Clarkson, Egner's wife, ran a millinery shop on the lean-to building on the side of it. They got married in the parlor of my house. So, you know, these are interesting things. But at the age of 15, I began to pilfer around the stores. So I was sent down to Troopsburg to live with my Uncle David Clarkson on the farm to be a farmhand. However, 2 weeks later, I come up missing and I'm in Olean. What am I doing in Olean? George Myrick came home from church and found me hiding behind his curtains. I admitted that I was there to burglarize them. Okay? So, what happened to Billy Clarkson? They say he's Billy Montgomery. He ended up in show business. He was known in show business by his birth name. 1911, he is making $1,500 a week. 1911, Clara Comstock is making $40 a month. So, he married first a fellow actress, Florence Moore, and then Minnie Allen. He died at the age of 54 and never had any children. So, says, we're going to show you a few pictures of him. This is his agent's picture and his signature. A couple that he was in. This is how we tie it all together. William Montgomery, the stepson of T.M. Clarkson of Andover, because after they got married, they moved back over to Andover. Planned to take the whole Clarkson family, numbering in numbers of 30 members, to Washington State next year to the home of a relative for an annual reunion. Montgomery is an actor and would charter a private coach for them. If I had not found that article, I would have never known that Billy Montgomery is Billy Clarkson. I just thought that was an interesting story. Just show you, he's a troubled teenager, but he ends up pretty good. So we just got a few more slides here left. Clara Comstock is this lady, Anna Hill is this lady, and then Mr. Neal is that one. Anna Hill was from Elmira, and they worked together their entire career. We're really good friends, the two ladies were. A couple of pictures of Anna Hill. And then I pulled some generic pictures off the internet. When you Google Orphan Train, you can find all kinds of stuff. I love this one. Their expressions on their face say it all. They're on a journey, to embark on a journey, and which would be life-changing. You could basically see that in their face. Norman Rockwell's depiction of what Orphan Train stop might look like. This is out of a museum down in Louisiana. And I guess you can see the last car on the train. So these are generic pictures, but I do have a couple more. This one's actually Clara and Anna with a large group of kids. I have in my possession, because one of her nieces sent them to me, her 1912, 13, and 14 train passes. Here's a letter in 1934 afterwards where she's following up with kids in New York State. In that book, every kid is given a number, and that's what she's referencing, what the numbers are here. The Royce home was a good home, not sure what occurred there. Arranging for Snyder twins to have their tonsils removed. Wanda must be going to be trained, going to go to Saunders to train. If approved, Mary and Wins to Wanda in New York. So, after she retired, she followed up with every kid that she had placed in New York. She hired her brother would take her around and drive her around, because she never had a driver's license, she never drove. And these are just some receipts that she had with her retirement and her pay. And then 2 more slides, I believe. Railroad tracks. Waiting for the wreck to be cleared and their immigration bag. You have to look on these kids' faces. And there she is in Esterville, Iowa. And of course, they have a baby and a little boy. So we're going to leave you with the chorus of the song we started out with. Take us in, we rode the orphan train. Take us in, we need a home, we need a name. Take us in, oh won't you be our kin? We're looking for someone to take us in. My references, I got them in my book, or if anybody wants to know my references. And my book, this book is $25, and I like I said, I include volume 1 and 2 of her thing. I do take Venmo and PayPal, cash checks, whatever. So, we'll open this up for questions. If anybody has any.
How often were the kids like taken out of one home and put in another? Do you have
When
any
you go through
idea?
her book, it's not a real common occurrence.
Ah,
It wasn't a real common occurrence when you go through it. And in my book, I actually showcase some different families, like out of Ogdenburg, why they ended up there going. And then I'm also finding that a lot of kids came back. Especially if, one family I showcased at Ogdenburg, they had like 8 kids in the family, and the youngest 3 were placed on the orphan train and sent off. Mom and Dad didn't take care of them any longer, must be. All 3 of them came back when they became of age. So it wasn't a very, and then I got one case I wrote in there out of Corning, where I'm finding that mom is living with one of the kids that were sent out, come back, living in Corning, and mom's living with them. So when she dies, she's living with that particular son that she had placed on the orphan train. So it was, anything else?
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually have 2 questions. One is about, did you find extended family, that they would eventually end up with extended family?
Extending family regarding...
Like aunts and uncles, or...
When I talk about the 2 girls that they're replaced the Cobb with Grandma Cobb and Adrian and put on the orphan train in Hornell, how we know about them is the younger girl wrote letters back home to aunts and uncles back home. There was actually 3 girls, and the 3rd one was Olive, and they've lost track of Olive, and that's why I don't showcase Olive. But there was actually 3 of them girls in that family. But yeah, it was common sometimes for them to communicate back home. That's how, like I said, some of the kids, when they got old enough, would move back to this area. That's because they're in contact with the family members that they did know back here.
Yeah, that's different than they do it now. I mean,
Totally
where
different.
where they
And
don't-
somebody asked once, how was it funded? Mr. Bryce, when it was funded at the beginning, was rich investors that had money to donate, and most of it was funded that way. The whole orphan train movement from 1854 to 1928, it was funded through that process of wealthy donors out of New York City donating monies. It wasn't dirt. And it was kind of the birth of the current foster care system. Yep.
The other question I had was how you got interested in history in the first place.
How did I get interested in history?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you. I've always liked history, and I hate to confess, but sitting in Sunday school as a little kid, I always saw the Bible is talking about what happened in history. These are things that happened years ago. I only like local history, by the way. I don't like this world and national history. I don't like history about the wars. Yeah, I've been to Gettysburg and I read about Civil War, and you see Civil War reenactments, but I like to know what makes your town your town. And the one example I give there is as a career, I worked as a computer consultant and helped hospitals all over the country install computer systems. And I'm working in Logan, West Virginia. And what I specialized in was the billing system for computer software. And I says to the girls I'm working with, it says, why is this town called Logan? Oh, is it Logan Berry? Is it somebody's name or something? They had no idea. It is named after Chief Logan of the Seneca Nation. He, after the Revolutionary War, he ended up living in a log cabin in that area, just so ways out of the little town. And he went to Washington, D.C. to do a talk. And in his talk, he says, the white man has killed all of my sons and all of my brothers, and my name is not going to carry on. So when they formed that little town, coal mining town, they named it Logan after him. So what makes your town your town? Why didn't they name it after some coal thing or something? That's why they named Logan, West Virginia, Logan, West Virginia. So as I traveled around the country, I says, what makes your town your town? That's what interests me in history. I'd like to know. I was fascinated when I saw your covered bridge coming through town, by the way. I didn't realize you guys had a covered bridge. So, so anything else? Does that answer?
Yeah.
Anything else? If not, we're going to turn it back over to you, John, and or whoever. And
Everyone,
glad to be able to come out and talk to you.
there's refreshments on the back counter there. If you'd like to buy Steve's books, they're up here. He'll take care of you and your money.
What can I say?
Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the cookies
Some of
and
the books on
coffee,
the Orphan,
lemonade,
they're not
whatever.
very complimentary. When you expect something very different.
That's why I wanted to do her, showcase her, because
Yeah.
it shows a whole different light than what you usually see on documentaries and
Well, that's
things.
why they brought a whole bunch of books from the library in Enfield and have read quite a bit. Very different.
Yeah, I'd like you to sign this. It's for my mother. My mother grew up in Canisteo, so did my father. Yeah.
Do I know them? Do I know who they
I
are?
doubt it. They moved
Can
to
I borrow your
Corning.
pens? Because I got one in my bag when I didn't pull it out.
Yeah. So my mother has Alzheimer's. So I just want you to know how important this book is to her.
Good.
Whenever she gets fixated on some crazy thing, I just give this to her. She's like, I mean, she's written stuff, mostly gibberish. I mean, there's Yankee scores in here and stuff, but it's
That
just
is so cool.
important
That
to
is
her.
so cool.
Thank you
She
for
does
doing
that.
it. Yeah.
That is so cool.
And you know, my dad helped maintain this. So my her maiden name was Kenyon.
Yep.
And my dad's name is Stocum, S-T-O-C-U-M.
Like Carl Stoken.
I don't know a Carl. His father was Elmer. My dad is Don Stocum, and there was 8 kids in his family. But,
Probably the same family.
Yeah, right.
Good?
awesome, perfect. Thank you so much. And I gave you my money, right?
You did.
Okay, so I'll just take one of these. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Let me grab a pen out of my bag here. It goes right down here.